Hello, Peace Scholars. I'm Avis. This is the Pieces Here podcast. And on Saturdays, I've been doing the Peacewarts Lab. It's August 15th, 2026. And usually during the video, this is on YouTube and Rumble, but also on audio on the podcast, I've been showing Teo. So I thought I would show him first so I don't forget. Let's see if we can get a picture of Teo. Hey, buddy. Hi, bud. There he is. So there'll be some collar jingling and jangling as usual. And I just went through with Gemini to kind of try to cut down some of my recurring costs. I'm going to go a little bit in the shade here. Right this time of day in this season. And CapCut is one. And so there might be some more today if my current downgraded model won't let me cut some of that out, but we'll see. You can always fast forward, or if you like the slower, kind of more meditative flow of my slower voice, that's fine too. And I know I have like various little quirky sniffles, and I was thinking about those lovely dog breeds that have breathing issues, like pugs and things. And I know as I age, it's only going to get worse, whatever quirks that might be coming across. I'm going to speak closer to my mic here for the podcast and the audio. So I guess I have to choose audio over sun in my eyes, which is fine. We'll just feel the beautiful sun. And we're going to start out with a question, why are we studying peace? And what I wrote in my journal, this is my peace journal. I'm lifting it up for the camera that I do my homework in for Peacewarts. And I wrote down, we study peace because peace is real. And peace has existed for many, many years in many, many places. There are specific architectures and practices for peace. And so to take peace seriously as a study, and, the tagline when we start the podcast is, we take the peace work seriously, but not ourselves. So no one's an expert. I'm sure even if someone goes to school and studies peace, they would not consider themselves to be an expert. If someone was an expert and could tell us everything of how to achieve peace, we'd probably already have it. But in coming here, or whatever practices you have, it's knowing that peace is real, and we keep shrinking the lie of war until one day we live in a world of peace. A couple things that I've been enjoying. This has been a little bit stressful week for me with some family issues. And some of the things that I like to do besides my yoga practice in the morning, I've been listening to John Craigie. I'm going to Hardly Strictly Bluegrass, and he's playing there. And he's also, I bought tickets for his show at the Great American Music Club, and I've been enjoying that. I have a small Shakespeare club. It's free. It's at aviskolfsbeck.com/Shakespeare Sherpa. Free downloadable bookmarks. I don't even ask for your email. There are bookmarks of all the characters. So I'll just print it off. And I don't use it every play, but it is helpful. I'm like, who is that? And you can just see, oh, it's one of Priam's sons, or it's one of the Trojan leaders. I'm on the 24th book, I believe. So when I finish this, I will have finished 2 years of reading a Shakespeare play a month. And yesterday, I hadn't slept that well because of these things that are going on. And I just read Shakespeare, absorbing some. I read aloud, and it's very meditative. I'm not saying anyone has to read a Shakespeare play a month or read all the plays, but having something that you can rely on that is a ritual is very helpful. I think those were the things. Oh, and the other thing I watched with my mom, I take care of my mother. We watched No Scratch, Teo, No Scratch. Thank you, buddy. Teo no scratch. We watched Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood with Tom Hanks about Mr. Rogers. Wow, what a beautiful film. And I have asked AI before, how could we achieve peace? And every single time, one of the components on the list is to love and care for and work with our children. How could we ever have peace if we're all a bunch of traumatized people, that we're missing so many things in our lives and our psyches? So that's why when we look at this peace horizon, we need to realize peace is here. We're moving towards peace. And as we take that seriously, we can, it can happen. And the children are such a big part of that. So beautiful film. I want to watch it again. And it's always nice to find one that my mom enjoys, because at this point in her life, some of them, she will complain about almost every one of them because they're a little too confusing for her. And at the end, they sing the closing song of the closing of each of the episodes of Mr. Rogers, and we both were singing together. That's a good memory that I'll have with her. So we are going to go through the homework today. And last week I did a Peacewarts lab where it was titled War or No War. And I was just weary from the week and all of this family stuff that's going on, and I didn't go over the homework. So it's going to be a little long in the homework. If you want to skip these and just stay in the Peacewarts classes, that's fine. And we're just going to talk about what the episode was, talk about one of the items of the homework and actually do it. And we'll see how my CapCut does. There might be some more, time of me looking these things up. And I thought this mantra of peace is real, peace is here, it's the name of the podcast, might be something if I am not able to cut those sections out of looking something up, that you might just sit with that phrase, peace is real. So the first episode 2 weeks ago on Monday was the very last class of Resonant Charms 101, the exit strategy, where we kind of summarized all of the 13 classes before, and we examined the structural exit using the Good Friday Agreement and Nelson Mandela's 1992 negotiations as models. We discussed how to end difficult conversations without destroying the possibility of future connection. We covered the 3-part exit protocol, the without prejudice formula, and the final 5% micro practice. And there's different things in that episode. Just one of the things was that they found if in resolving something, or when there are certain agreements in a court, for example, if they made references to the future, that compliance was greater. And, the gist of this class was that when we finish up a negotiation, we want to be thinking of the future and how can we end this in a way that facilitates that. So the homework, number one of the homework, and there are 3 pieces of the homework each week, and they're always in the show notes. One idea I had, people could have Peacewarts parties and just get together and do some homework together. Wouldn't that be beautiful? I don't have that many listeners, and those who are listening, I really value you. And I just think over time of, however many years down the road, there are going to be people here and there that might hear the classes that I'm putting together. So let's just see. This is the time where you could say to yourself that peace is real. As I'm looking this up, I won't do the Jeopardy music. So it was look up the Good Friday Agreement and the use of the without prejudice formula. The Good Friday Agreement, also known as the Belfast Agreement, is a historic 1998 accord that largely ended 30 years of violent conflict in Northern Ireland, known as the Troubles. The core structure was built on 3 distinct strands of covering governance within Northern Ireland, cross-border cooperation with the Republic of Ireland, Ireland and East-West relations across the British Isles. So the without prejudice formula in the agreement: in general legal context, the without prejudice rule protects candid, good faith settlement negotiations from being used as admissions of liability if talks collapse. In the context of the Northern Ireland peace process and the Good Friday Agreement, the without prejudice formula allows opposing factions, specifically unionists who wanted to remain British and nationalists who favored a united Ireland, to enter negotiations and sign the accord. That was not how I understood it in the script. So I'd love to hear from anyone. I was thinking, but I might be thinking of a past episode where you can take a pause and the fact that you're going to resume later doesn't have any meaning beyond you're just taking a pause. That's what I thought it meant. So, but it does make sense that even entering the negotiations, you'd both be agreeing that, we're going to come in here and talk, and it's not going to be binding until we say it is the gist of that. But let's see if we go down. Okay, so further exploration there. That does not satisfy me, and I don't want to do a lot of searching with you here on the video. So I'm going to put a little asterisk here to look that up, and maybe we'll pop on next time. We'll see if we found something else related to that. Now we're going to go to episode 300, which is the first class in social chemistry. I'm loving social chemistry 101. It's all the things individually and how we interact with others and how we can affect the room. The first one is called, the first class was called The Cracked Cauldron. In this episode, we open the Department of Social Chemistry with an orientation on the alchemy of connection and the dangers of the toxic brew of righteousness. We explore how high-stress biology narrows human perception through the auditory gate and tunnel hearing. Using the contrast between the 1853 Crimean crisis and the 1896 Battle of Adwa, we examine how to stabilize volatile reactions by addressing biology before logic. I will say, with all the things I'm going through with my family, my sisters in particular, these things about, what kind of presence and what's my physiology doing when, we're trying to have a conversation about something, yet you have all these years of history. You find yourself getting dysregulated. So the number one of this homework is look up the term auditory gating and its relation to stress. Peace is real. That's our little mantra when Avis is looking up the things. The AI overview is impaired filtering of repetitive background noise is the core consequence of stress on auditory gating. So we get really focused. And that came from the National Institute of Health, Acute Stress and Gender Effects in Sensory Gating. What is auditory gating? Auditory gating is the automatic process in the brain that filters out repetitive or irrelevant background sounds. It prevents the central nervous system from being overloaded with useless sensory data. Science usually tests it using a paired click test. They play two identical clicks a fraction of a second apart and measure the brainwave responses like the P50 wave. A healthy brain reduces its response to the second click because it recognizes the sound as redundant. Yeah, I think in this case, the episode talks about how when we are in this stress environment, we get very tunnel vision, and it's hard to really have a broad perspective on what's happening or, listen to all aspects of what's being communicated. So I think if we had more time, let me just scroll down a little bit and see if there's anything else that is grabbing me. Nope. That too is a little unsatisfactory, but that's also because I'm just using a very quick down and dirty way to check off my homework, right? So now we are going to the next class, episode 301, which would have been Social Chemistry Class 2. And the title of that class that came out last Friday was Temperature Before Truth. And in that, all of the Peacewarts classes are very short. They're, with the intro and outro, about 10, 11 minutes. We examined the law of the thermal dominance in social interactions. The class explored why facts fail in high heat environments, and it introduces the ER rule of stabilizing the nervous system before introducing the truth. We analyzed the failure of the 1905 Red Sunday and the environmental escalation of the 1968 Chicago Convention. Number 1 of this homework, and I'll read number 3. Number 3 is to journal about the fuel effect of facts during high heat conflict. So number 1 of the homework was look up the basic priorities of ER trauma protocol, stabilization versus diagnosis. Part of the problem is I should actually be typing in a full question into Google, and I'm being lazy, and I'm just cutting and pasting what the homework says, which is look up, see what we get. Stabilization is the absolute priority, taking precedence over definitive diagnosis in emergency room trauma protocols. Under standard frameworks like advanced trauma life support, life threats are managed the moment they are found, and detailed diagnostic workups are postponed until the patient is stable. Core priorities: stabilization first, immediate life threat correction, treating physiology over anatomy, damage control, resuscitation. Yeah, so this strikes me as AI makes connections on things, and made this connection with ER, which looking strictly at what's coming up in the homework, it's like, duh, you need to keep the person alive before we can get into the details of all the things that are wrong. I've watched multiple series of Grey's Anatomy. That, speaking of meditative things, it's like there's so many seasons of that. It's like just something I turn on at the end of the day for like 20, 30 minutes of Grey's Anatomy. I might never finish that series. So in the episode, what I learned was it's so easy to say, and we had item meeting with my sisters last Saturday morning, which is why I was a little weary and couldn't do the homework and did something else, just did the narration. So easy just to jump into what the topic is and just get started, but taking that time to see, okay, what's everyone's energy like, and do we need to take a moment to just kind of make sure everything's stabilized. So then the next episode was the Peacewarts lab last Saturday, and then on Monday of this week we had class 3 of social chemistry called the first 90 seconds. And we examined the cortisol tint, the 90-second biological window at the start of an interaction that dictates the tone of the entire meeting, using the failure of the Willie-Nicky telegrams and the successful de-escalation of the 1996 Atlanta standoff by FBI negotiator Gary Nosner. We explore how to use orientation as intervention to stabilize the initial chemical spike. And similar to what we were just talking about, when we're stressed and that cortisol is flooding the body, that it says it takes about 90 seconds to have that start to dissipate. So the homework here is, in each of the episodes, I started this recently. We didn't have book recommendations in the first few classes, but each of the classes also have book recommendations, like in this case, and the books are all in the show notes. So if you just peruse the podcast on any podcast player, you'd see the recommended books. So for this episode, for example, Molecules of Emotion by Candace B. Pert. And then the other book was The Nervous System Reset by Jessica McGuire. So the homework here is look up the initial contact protocols used by Gary Nosner in the 1996 Atlanta standoff. We're looking that up. going to take a deep breath and say, peace is real. Long pause, not the 90-second cortisol spike. So my episodes are created with Gemini. And so what I specifically put into the chat or into the Google window is look up the initial contact protocols used by Gary Nosner in the 1996 Atlanta standoff. And look what I found out. And this is, the source is Virginia Magazine. Gary Nosner did not lead a standoff in Atlanta in 1996. Rather, the prominent 1996 peaceful resolution he managed as head of the FBI's crisis negotiation unit was the 81-day standoff with the Montana Freemen in Jordan, Montana. Note the 1996 Atlanta event tied to the Olympics was the Centennial Olympic Park bombing, which involved a post-explosion manhunt rather than a barricaded hostage standoff. So let's see if when he negotiated with the Montana Freemen, if he did a good job. And then we're going to show, some of you use AI, it'll be no surprise that AI makes mistakes. And that telling them they make a mistake is quite humorous too. So what I expect will happen will just be, oh shoot, I messed that up. So let's just continue reading about what Gary Nosner did. So initial contact and crisis protocols. While initiating contact during the high-stakes right-wing militia, and sidebar, I will go in and correct this episode. When initiating contact during high-stakes right-wing militia and anti-government standoffs like the Montana Freeman event, Nosner's protocols centered on de-escalation and behavioral change rather than immediate confrontation. Active listening skills. Derived from mental health counseling models, negotiators focus heavily on listening without immediate interruption, judgment, or aggressive pushback to lower intense emotional stress. That's from Time Magazine. The first 90-second stabilization, managing the initial interaction window to prevent a chemical cortisol spike of perceived survival threat, prioritizing calm, introductions over interrogation. That was also from Time Magazine. Time as a tool, stalling for time, avoiding artificial deadlines or rushing the subject, allowing high emotions to gradually subside so the subject could eventually engage in more rational decision-making. And third-party intermediaries, TPIs, utilizing respected outside figures, local leaders, or community mediators to bridge communication gaps and avoiding mixed signals. So ensuring external tactical operations and tactical rescue teams remain completely synchronized with the non-escalatory messaging coming from negotiators, avoiding the paradox of power mistakes made at Waco. So what questions come up for me here? Obviously, Gemini made a mistake with Gary Nosner, but did that Montana Freeman have a good outcome? So let's go to Gemini and let's just tell it. That's strange. Teo started barking and then my video went off. So I don't know if I had a little connection issue or what, but it gave me time to look this up. So the first thing I did was I said that when I was doing my homework, I told Gemini, when I looked it up, it said that Gary Nosner was involved in the Montana Freeman, not the Atlanta Centennial Olympic Park bombing in Atlanta. So he says, yes, I picture Gemini as of the male persuasion, but that would be it said. Yes, that is a mistake in the show notes. Gary Nosner was the lead negotiator during the 81-day Montana Freeman standoff in the spring of 1996, where his team famously employed de-escalation, slow-paced communication, and orientation strategies to stabilize the initial volatile chemical responses without resorting to tactical force. It was also, 1996 was also the year of the Centennial Olympic Park bombing in Atlanta. So it was just a plain error. So my plan will be, I'll edit that episode. I plan to make Peacewarts classes into a book. And so I'll obviously be fact-checking all of these. And usually what happens in terms of the fact-checking is something will just seem off to me, but obviously I don't know every aspect of history. So if I was more diligent, I would have thrown those into Claude, and the next class is morphological piece, I believe. So I may have to start doing that. This is the first one that has been so blatantly wrong, unless something else is in there that I'll find when I'm doing the book project. So I said, how did the Montana Freeman standoff end up? Because Gemini's whole thing was they de-escalated, so they had a better result. Did that happen in this case? And the 81-day standoff ended on June 13th, 1996, with the peaceful surrender of the remaining 16 members of the Montana Freemen. Well, what does that mean, remaining? Doesn't sound like everybody made it, so I'll ask that in a second. Unlike the fatal sieges at Ruby Ridge in 92 and Waco in 93, the FBI deliberately overhauled its strategy for the Justice Township compound in Jordan, Montana. The goal was to avoid tactical assaults and exhaust the group through patient low arousal containment. So let's just ask about that. What do you mean by remaining? Did some die? And I pasted in that sentence where he said remaining. No, nobody died during the standoff. Not a single shot was fired, and there were 0 casualties throughout the entire 81 days. Okay, so there we go. That wasn't the direction I planned to go. That is something that I would say that it's the nature of AI, but it's no excuses that I'm not running these through another source, especially now that it's about a year into me using AI, and I will start doing that, and that's what I have to say about that. So let's moving on to the final episode, which is that came out yesterday, Social Chemistry Class 4, The Stabilizing Crystal. In that episode, we explored the concept of emotional contagion and how a single regulated nervous system can stabilize a group. We analyzed the clinical calm of Dr. John Snow during the 1854 cholera outbreak and Ernest Shackleton's management of his crew's internal environment in 1916. This class introduces the protocol for becoming a biological anchor in a panicked room. It talks about how, when our physical body, we have this radius of energy, and if we're breathing deeply and calming ourselves, that it can affect others. And the homework is look up Dr. John Snow's mapping of the 1854 cholera outbreak. I knew something about this just from the TV series Victoria, about Queen Victoria, one of the episodes, they're having the outbreak, and it actually has Dr. John Snow comes to her and talks to her about what he thinks is happening. Let's see what it says. Hopefully we'll have a better result than the last one. Dr. John Snow's 1854 cholera map is a foundational artifact in epidemiology that visually linked a deadly outbreak in Soho, London, to a single contaminated water source. Key aspects of the mapping: location and outbreak. The epidemic struck the Broad Street, now Broadwick Street, area of Soho, London, causing over 600 deaths in a few weeks. Challenging miasma. At the time, the prevailing miasma theory blamed disease on bad air. Snow hypothesized that cholera was waterborne. Methodology. Snow plotted the address of each cholera fatality as a stack of black bars or lines on a street map created with lithographer Charles Cheffins. The clustering. The spot map revealed a sharp cluster of deaths tightly centered around the public water pump on Broad Street. The intervention. Snow presented his findings to local officials, prompting them to remove the handle of the Broad Street pump, which helped curtail the epidemic and cemented the event as a milestone in spatial data analysis. There you go. So that seems like an interesting example for the episode. I guess he did need to remain calm in pursuing the data. It doesn't seem to be such a direct application of being a calm person in a space of a room, but there are different beliefs on how far energy travels. So I could think that, finding the result and getting the pump handle turned off was the most important part of what happened there. But remaining calm and not hysterical and focusing on science could have had an impact in other ways too. But if I had pressed Gemini, we probably could have come up with a different example for that episode. So I think what I'm taking from this, and part of my mind is saying, that is just not what I wanted to find, but I'm here to be transparent that in this time of new AI and things are moving quickly. I listened to the Moonshots podcast, and things are moving very, very quickly, and the models are hallucinating and making fewer errors. And Gemini isn't high on the list. They're not at the very front of the race, but it is, regardless of, even when I'm using Claude, I will find things that I'm working on, some research projects, and I was trying to find some reviews, and it came back with some information. The way it phrased how it saw the reviews was not, I think it used the word, there are mixed reviews. And in English, mixed reviews means there's quite a few bad reviews. There's bad and there's good, and that is definitely not favorable if someone says, oh, it had mixed reviews. And so I said, well, show me the reviews. And it came back and they were favorable reviews. And I think it was language that it pulled to just kind of be lazy, for lack of a better word, or to get the job done. And so everything that we get needs to be interpreted. And this was to actually put Mr. Gary Nosler in the wrong place was a bigger error than I'm used to seeing. But I did want to share it and be transparent. And I will get that episode edited and let you know about it next time. And I will also throw the episodes, I think social chemistry is already written, and then I'm going to start working on the next class. And so I'll make sure that these remaining classes are checked, and also everything for the book will be checked. And then moving forward in the new classes, we'll certainly get another set of eyes on the facts, so that as we learn about peace, we know that the history examples are accurate. I will just end by saying, again, Mr. Rogers, on seeing the film with Tom Hanks, seeing a life that was so devoted to helping others, and one of his strengths was just to be 100% present with whoever he was with, and to really see them and to make sure that they knew that he saw their worth. And he spent a whole lifetime doing that. And the more we can feel our own worth, the less that we will be harming others. So have a beautiful week. Peace and love.